When my labour pains started at 3 a.m, I reached for my husband's phone to charge it. But when I saw that message on his screen, it wasn't just my heart that stopped. My entire marriage died in that moment. Before you hear this story to the end, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced the pain of betrayal, hit that like button. I'm Rebecca Chen, 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living in a perfect marriage. My husband Daniel and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5, and we were finally expecting our first child after 3 years of trying. I was 9 months pregnant, glowing with anticipation, completely unaware that the man sleeping next to me every night was living a double life that would shatter everything I believed about love, trust, and family. Looking back now, I can see the signs were there all along. But when you're in love, truly, deeply, blindly in love, you don't see the cracks in the foundation until the whole house comes crashing down. And when that crash comes during the most vulnerable time of your life, when you're carrying his child and depending on him for everything, the devastation is beyond anything you could ever imagine. Let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how a love story can become a horror story, and how sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't planned. It's served ice cold in a hospital delivery room. Daniel and I met in college, during our junior year at Northwestern University. I was studying marketing, he was in business administration, and we were both working part-time at the campus coffee shop. Our first conversation happened over a broken espresso machine that he somehow managed to fix with nothing but determination and YouTube tutorials. His persistence impressed me, and his smile made me weak in the knees. "You're going to make some company very lucky someday," I told him, as he triumphantly served the first perfect latte the machine had made in weeks. "And you're going to make some man very lucky someday," he replied, handing me the drink with a wink that made my heart skip. We were inseparable from that moment on. Study dates turned into real dates, group projects became couple projects, and by senior year, we were planning our future together with the confidence that only young love can provide. Daniel was everything I thought I wanted in a partner, ambitious, charming, romantic, and completely devoted to me. Or so I believed. After graduation, we moved to Chicago together. I landed a position at a mid-sized advertising agency, while Daniel started working at a financial consulting firm downtown. We rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Those early years were magic. We were building our careers, saving money for a house, and dreaming about the family we'd have someday. Daniel proposed on our 3rd anniversary, in the same coffee shop where we first met. He had somehow convinced the current manager to let him recreate our first day, broken espresso machine and all. When he got down on one knee right there behind the counter, I cried so hard I could barely say yes. The ring was modest, a simple solitaire that fit perfectly on my finger and perfectly within our budget. But to me, it represented everything: our past, our present, and our beautiful future together. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at my parents' house in the suburbs. Daniel's family flew in from Seattle, and for one perfect weekend, it felt like we were surrounded by nothing but love and support. During our vows, Daniel looked me straight in the eyes and promised to love me through sickness and health, through good times and bad, and to always be faithful to me and our future family. I remember feeling so certain in that moment that I had found my person, my forever, my happy ending. For the first 3 years of our marriage, Daniel was the perfect husband. He remembered anniversaries, brought me flowers for no reason, and never missed an opportunity to tell me how beautiful I was. When I got promoted to senior account manager at my agency, he threw me a surprise party. When I was stressed about a big presentation, he'd run me a bath and cook my favourite meal. We started trying for a baby in our 4th year of marriage. Like most couples, we assumed it would happen quickly. When it didn't, we told ourselves to be patient. When months turned into a year, then 2 years, we sought help from fertility specialists. The journey was emotionally exhausting and financially draining, but Daniel was my rock through all of it. "Whatever it takes," he'd whisper when I'd cry after another negative pregnancy test. "We're going to have our family, Rebecca. I promise you." The irony of those words haunts me now. When we finally got pregnant after our 2nd round of IVF, Daniel cried harder than I did. He called in sick to work that day, and we spent hours just holding each other, overwhelmed with joy and relief. He immediately started researching cribs, car seats, and baby names. He downloaded pregnancy apps and became obsessed with tracking every milestone of the baby's development. Week 12. He'd announce every Tuesday, showing me pictures on his phone of how big our baby was getting. She's the size of a plum this week. She? I'd tease. How do you know it's a girl? Father's intuition, he'd say, placing his hand on my barely visible bump. And she's going to be just as beautiful as her mother. Looking back, I realised the changes in Daniel's behaviour started around my second trimester. At the time, I attributed everything to normal pregnancy stress and his anxiety about becoming a father. He started working longer hours, explaining that he wanted to position himself for a promotion before the baby arrived. He'd come home tired and distracted, often falling asleep on the couch while I was telling him about my day. "Sorry, babe," he'd say when I'd wake him up to come to bed. "This Richardson account is killing me. Once this deal closes, things will calm down." But things never calmed down. If anything, they got worse. Around month 6, Daniel started taking more business trips. Overnight trips to Milwaukee, weekend conferences in Indianapolis, client dinners that kept him out until midnight. When I expressed concern about him being away so much during my pregnancy, he'd get defensive. "I'm doing this for us, Rebecca," he'd snap, an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. "For our family. Do you want me to turn down opportunities that could secure our future?" I didn't want to be the nagging pregnant wife, so I swallowed my concerns and tried to be supportive. When he'd call during his trips, he always sounded happy to hear from me, asking about the baby and my doctor appointments. But now I know those calls were probably strategically timed for when he was alone. The phone calls started during my 7th month. Daniel would get texts and calls at odd hours, early mornings, late evenings, during dinner. When I'd ask who it was, he'd say it was work, or a client, or his buddy from college. "Since when does Jake call you at 11 p.m? I asked one night after his phone buzzed for the 3rd time during the movie we were watching. "He's going through a divorce," Daniel explained without looking away from the TV. "He needs someone to talk to." I felt guilty for questioning him. Here I was, getting suspicious of my husband for being a good friend to someone in need. What kind of wife was I becoming? By month 8, Daniel's behaviour had shifted dramatically. He was distant, irritable, and increasingly absent even when he was physically present. He'd sit at dinner scrolling through his phone, claiming he was reading work emails. He stopped asking about my doctor appointments and seemed annoyed when I'd share updates about the baby's development. "That's great, babe," he'd say in a flat tone when I'd tell him the baby had dropped or that I was dilated a centimetre. "I'm just really stressed about this merger at work." The merger. That became his excuse for everything. Why he couldn't come to the birthing class we'd signed up for. Why he missed my baby shower because of an emergency client meeting. Why he couldn't help assemble the crib because he had to prepare for a big presentation. Our friends started noticing too. At our childbirth class, I attended alone while other couples practiced breathing techniques together. The instructor kept asking where Daniel was, and I kept making excuses. "He really wanted to be here," I'd lie, "but work has been crazy." My sister Maya was the first person to voice what I was too scared to admit to myself. "Rebecca, I'm worried about you," she said during one of our weekly coffee dates when I was 8.5 months pregnant. "You seem lonely. Where is Daniel in all this?" "He's just stressed about work," I defended him automatically. "Once the baby comes, things will go back to normal." Maya studied my face with the concerned expression she'd worn since we were kids, and she'd find me crying over some playground drama. "When's the last time he went to a doctor's appointment with you?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. When's the last time you two had a conversation about anything other than logistics? Who's picking up what? When bills are due? That kind of thing. Again, I had no answer. "Rebecca," Maya said gently, "I've been married for 10 years. Work stress doesn't make you disappear from your pregnant wife's life. Something else is going on." I wanted to argue with her, to defend my husband and my marriage, but deep down, I knew she was right. The man I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me, had been replaced by a stranger who treated me like a roommate he barely tolerated. But I was 9 months pregnant with his child. What was I supposed to do with that information? The night everything changed started like any other night in those final weeks of my pregnancy. I was exhausted, uncomfortable, and desperate for the baby to arrive. My due date was still 5 days away, but I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks, and I was convinced I'd be pregnant forever. Daniel had worked late again, coming home around 10 p.m. with takeout Chinese food and an apologetic smile. "Sorry, babe," he said, kissing my forehead as I struggled to get comfortable on the couch. The Richardson meeting ran long and then traffic was brutal. Richardson. Always Richardson. I'd started to hate that name. We ate dinner mostly in silence, Daniel scrolling through his phone between bites of lo mein. I tried to engage him in conversation about the baby's room, which we'd finally finished that weekend, but he gave me distracted one-word answers. "Do you think we need another pack of newborn diapers?" I asked. "Probably," he mumbled, not looking up from his screen. "The car seat installation appointment is tomorrow at 3. Can you meet me there?" "I'll try." "Daniel," I said, a note of frustration creeping into my voice. "This is important. The baby could come any day now." He finally looked up from his phone, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that I couldn't identify. Guilt? Annoyance? Fear? "I know, Rebecca. I'm doing my best here. Work is just insane right now." "Work has been insane for months," I pointed out. "When does it end? When do I get my husband back?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "When I close this deal and get the promotion that's going to pay for our child's future, I thought you'd be more supportive of that." There it was again, that edge in his voice, the implication that I was being unreasonable for wanting my husband's attention during the most important time of our lives. We went to bed that night without resolving anything, Daniel claiming he was too tired to talk, and falling asleep within minutes of his head hitting the pillow. I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with doubts and fears I'd been suppressing for months. Was I losing my mind? Was this just normal pregnancy anxiety? Or was my marriage actually falling apart while I was about to bring a child into the world? Around 3 a.m, I was jolted awake by a sharp pain across my abdomen. Different from the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd been having, stronger, more intense, more purposeful. I waited, counting the minutes until the next one came. 12 minutes later, another one hit. My heart started racing. This could be it. This could actually be labour. I reached over to wake Daniel, but his side of the bed was empty. I could hear him in the bathroom, probably dealing with another late-night work crisis. His phone was on his nightstand, and the screen was lit up with notifications. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I reached for his phone, intending to check the time and maybe use the contraction timing app he'd downloaded weeks ago. The screen was still unlocked from whatever he'd been looking at, and I found myself staring at a text message conversation that made no sense. The contact name was Richardson Project, but the messages weren't about any business deal. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. It's been too long." The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m, 3 minutes ago. My hands started shaking as I scrolled up through the conversation. More messages, going back weeks, months. "I miss you so much when you're with her. Only a few more weeks until the baby comes and we can figure this out. I hate that you have to pretend to care about that pregnancy. I love you, Danny. Only you." And then I saw Daniel's responses. "I love you too, Melissa. This is all just temporary. Once the baby's born and things settle down, I'll find a way to leave. The pregnancy has been hell. She's so needy and emotional all the time. Can't wait until I don't have to pretend anymore." The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the hardwood floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the silence of our bedroom. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation ripping through my chest. 8 years together, 5 years of marriage, 3 years of trying for this baby, months of fertility treatments, hormone injections, hope and heartbreak. All of it had been a lie. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor of our bedroom, staring at Daniel's phone and trying to process what I'd just discovered. The contractions kept coming, now about 8 minutes apart, but I felt disconnected from my body, like I was floating somewhere above the scene, watching it happen to someone else. Daniel was still in the bathroom, probably texting Melissa back, probably telling her how much he loved her while his pregnant wife was going into labour just 20 feet away. Melissa. The name from his phone became a face in my mind as I remembered the woman I'd met at Daniel's company Christmas party 2 years ago. Tall, blonde, young, probably mid-20s. She worked in his department, and Daniel had introduced her as the new junior consultant. "Rebecca, this is Melissa Grant," he'd said with that charming smile that had once made me feel so special. "Melissa, my beautiful wife." Melissa had shaken my hand with a firm grip and a bright smile. "Daniel talks about you all the time," she'd said. "It's so nice to finally meet you." At the time, I'd thought she seemed sweet, maybe a little nervous around the boss's wife. Now I realised she was probably sizing up her competition. How long had it been going on? Looking back through the messages, I could see references going back at least 8 months, which meant it had started when I was barely showing, when Daniel was still pretending to be excited about the baby, when he was still holding my hand at doctor's appointments and talking about nursery themes. The bathroom door opened, and Daniel emerged, checking his phone immediately. When he saw it wasn't on the nightstand where he'd left it, his eyes darted around the room until he spotted me sitting on the floor beside the bed. "Rebecca, what are you doing down there? Are you okay?" I held up his phone, and I watched the colour drain from his face as he realised what had happened. "I'm in labour," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. "And apparently you wish I wasn't." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but another contraction hit, and I doubled over with the pain. This one was stronger, lasting longer, and when it passed, Daniel was kneeling beside me, reaching for his phone. "Don't," I said, pulling it away from him. "Don't you dare try to delete those messages." "Rebecca, let me explain." "Explain what?" I stood up slowly, my hand on my belly. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with some girl from your office. Explain how you told her that pretending to care about our baby was hell. Explain how you're planning to leave me after I give birth to your child. It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I cut him off. "The only question is what I'm going to do about it." Another contraction gripped me, and this time Daniel reached out to steady me. I jerked away from his touch. "Don't," I said. "Don't pretend to care now. Save it for Melissa." I grabbed my hospital bag from the closet, the bag I'd packed 3 weeks ago with such excitement and anticipation. Daniel followed me as I made my way downstairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To the hospital," I said without looking back. "Our baby is coming whether you want her to or not. Rebecca, you can't drive yourself. You're in labour." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to face him. In the dim light from the hallway, he looked like a stranger. When had I stopped really seeing him? When had he become this person who could lie to my face for months while I carried his child? "You're right," I said. "I can't drive myself." I pulled out my own phone and called Maya. "Rebecca, it's 3:30 in the morning. What's wrong?" "I'm in labour," I said, my eyes locked on Daniel's face. "And I need you to drive me to the hospital." "Oh my God! Yes, of course. Where's Daniel?" "He's here," I said, "but he won't be coming with us." Maya arrived within 20 minutes, still in her pyjamas with her hair in a messy bun, but completely alert and ready for action. My sister had always been my protector, even though she was 2 years younger than me. When she walked into our living room and saw Daniel standing there while I sat alone on the couch, timing contractions, her expression hardened in a way I rarely saw. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking between us. "It's complicated," Daniel started, but I cut him off. "It's actually very simple," I said. "Daniel has been having an affair. I found out tonight. Right now I need to get to the hospital, and I need someone I can trust to drive me there." Maya's mouth fell open. She looked at Daniel with pure disgust. "Are you kidding me? Your wife is in labour and you've been cheating on her." "Maya, please," Daniel said, running his hands through his hair. "This isn't how I wanted—" "How you wanted what?" Maya snapped. "How you wanted her to find out? When exactly were you planning to tell her? After the baby was born? After she'd recovered from childbirth? When, Daniel?" Another contraction hit, and Maya immediately sat beside me, taking my hand and coaching me through the breathing techniques we'd learned in the birthing class Daniel had skipped. "We need to go," Maya said once the contraction passed. "These are getting closer together." As we walked toward the door, Daniel grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, please, let me drive you. Let me be there for the birth. We can work through this." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. For just a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with. Scared, desperate, sorry. But then I remembered his text messages, his lies, his plans to leave me. "You made your choice months ago," I said quietly. "I'm making mine now." Maya drove me to Northwestern Memorial Hospital while I sat in the passenger seat, alternating between intense physical pain and emotional numbness. Every few minutes, she'd glance over at me with concern. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked as we pulled into the hospital parking garage. "Not yet," I said. "Right now, I just need to focus on having this baby safely." But even as I said it, my mind was racing with questions and plans. Daniel would probably follow us to the hospital. He'd want to be in the delivery room, playing the part of the devoted father, while secretly counting down the days until he could leave us for his young girlfriend. The thought made me physically sick. At the registration desk, I made a decision that surprised even me. "I need to speak to security," I told the intake nurse. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Chen?" "My husband may try to come here tonight," I explained. "But I don't want him in my room or anywhere near me during the delivery. Can you make sure he's not allowed up to the maternity ward?" The nurse's expression softened with understanding. She'd probably seen this before, women in vulnerable situations who needed protection from the very people who should be protecting them. "Of course, honey. We'll take care of that. Do you have someone else you'd like to list as your birth partner?" I looked at Maya, who was holding my hand tightly. "My sister," I said. "Maya Chen Williams." The next several hours blurred together in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and emotional turmoil. Maya never left my side, holding my hand through contractions, feeding me ice chips, and running interference with the medical staff when I needed space to process everything that had happened. Around 7 a.m., as my labour progressed faster than the doctors had expected, a nurse informed me that someone named Daniel Chen was in the waiting room, asking about my status. "He says he's your husband," she said gently, "but I see here that you've requested he not be allowed in your room." My heart clenched. Part of me, the part that still remembered 8 years of love and partnership, wanted to let him in. This was still his child, after all. But the larger part of me, the part that had read his cruel text messages about my pregnancy, couldn't bear the thought of him pretending to care while secretly resenting every moment. "He can wait," I said, "but I don't want to see him." By 10 a.m. I was fully dilated and ready to push. Maya held one hand while a nurse held the other, and together they coached me through the most intense physical experience of my life. Every time a contraction hit, I found myself thinking about Daniel's text messages, using my anger as fuel to power through the pain. "I hate that you have to pretend to care about that pregnancy." Push. "She's so needy and emotional all the time." Push. "Can't wait until I don't have to pretend anymore." Push. At 10:47 a.m., my daughter was born. Perfect, healthy, beautiful Sophia Chen. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure miracle. When the doctor placed her on my chest, everything else faded away. Daniel, Melissa, the betrayal, the lies, none of it mattered in that moment. There was just me and this tiny person who had been growing inside me for 9 months, who was finally here, safe and whole. "She's beautiful, Rebecca," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look what you did. Look what you created." I looked down at Sophia's perfect little face, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and felt a fierce, protective love unlike anything I'd ever experienced. In that moment, I made a silent promise to my daughter. I would never let anyone treat her the way her father had treated me. I would teach her to know her worth and never settle for less than she deserved. The nurses cleaned us up and moved us to a recovery room, where I tried to breastfeed for the first time, while Maya sent updates to our parents and friends. I was exhausted, but oddly energized, high on adrenaline and new mother hormones. That's when the nurse brought me Daniel's flowers. 2 dozen red roses with a card that read, "Congratulations on bringing our beautiful daughter into the world. I love you both so much. Can we please talk? Daniel. I stared at the card, feeling a familiar twist of confusion and pain. This was the Daniel I remembered. Thoughtful, romantic, eager to make things right. But I also remembered the other Daniel, the one who had been planning to leave us both. What do you want to do? Maya asked gently. I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and felt that fierce protectiveness surge through me again. I want to send him a message, I said, but not the kind he's expecting. I reached for my phone and scrolled through Daniel's text messages until I found the thread with Richardson Project, aka Melissa. I screenshotted the most damning exchanges, the ones where he talked about leaving me and called my pregnancy hell. Then I composed a text message to Daniel. Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful, just like our daughter. Speaking of beautiful things, I thought you might want to see some of the beautiful messages I found on your phone last night. I've forwarded them to my lawyer, my sister, your mother, and your boss. Congratulations on becoming a father. Too bad you won't be much of a husband anymore. I attached the screenshots and hit send. Then I blocked his number. The response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Daniel trying to reach me from other phones. Maya had set my phone to Do Not Disturb, but we could see the notifications piling up. About an hour later, Maya received a call from our mother. Rebecca sent what to who? I could hear Mum's voice through the phone speaker, high-pitched with shock and concern. Mum, it's complicated, Maya said, stepping out into the hallway to take the call privately. When she came back, her expression was grim. Daniel called your parents, she said. He told them you'd had some kind of breakdown and were keeping him from seeing his daughter. He's asking them to talk sense into you. I wasn't surprised. This was classic Daniel, when caught in wrongdoing, deflect and manipulate, make himself the victim and paint me as the unstable, irrational one. What did Mum say? I asked. I forwarded her the screenshots, Maya said with a slight smile. She changed her tune pretty quickly after that. The next few hours were a whirlwind of visitors and phone calls. My parents arrived, shaken but supportive, ready to do whatever I needed. Daniel's mother called, crying and apologising for her son's behaviour. Several of our mutual friends reached out, shocked by the screenshots that were apparently making the rounds through our social circle. But the most satisfying call came around 6 p.m. Mrs. Chen. The voice was professional, unfamiliar. This is Janet Morrison from Hartwell & Associates. I'm the HR director at your husband's company. Oh, I said, suddenly alert. Hello? I wanted to call personally to let you know that we've opened an investigation into the relationship between your husband and Ms. Grant. Based on the evidence you provided, it appears there may have been violations of our company's ethics policies regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. I sat up straighter in my hospital bed. Evidence I provided? The screenshots you sent to Mr. Richardson, who is incidentally our CEO, not a client account as your husband claimed. Mr. Richardson forwarded them to me immediately. My heart raced. In my exhausted emotional state, I had sent those screenshots to the entire contact list I'd found in Daniel's phone, not really thinking about who might be receiving them. Apparently, one of those contacts had been his actual boss. I see, I said carefully. I want you to know that we take these matters very seriously, Janet continued, particularly when they involve falsification of work records. Mr. Chen has been claiming business expenses for what appear to be personal entertainment with Ms. Grant. Daniel hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been stealing from his company to fund his affair. Mrs. Chen, I know this is a difficult time for you, Janet continued, but if you're willing, we may need you to provide a formal statement as part of our investigation. After I hung up, I sat in my hospital bed holding Sophia, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. This time yesterday, I'd been married to a man I trusted completely, excited about starting our family together. Now I was a single mother with a newborn, and my soon-to-be ex-husband was facing both a divorce and potential criminal charges for embezzlement. Maya sat down in the chair beside my bed. How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question seriously. How was I feeling? Free, I said finally. Terrified, but free. And it was true. For months I'd been living with this nagging sense that something was wrong with my marriage, with Daniel, with us. I'd been gaslighting myself, making excuses, accepting behaviour that deep down I knew was unacceptable. Now that the truth was out, painful as it was, I felt like I could breathe again. Over the next 3 days in the hospital, the full scope of Daniel's betrayal became clear. His company's investigation uncovered months of fraudulent expense reports, fake business trips, and misuse of company resources. The affair with Melissa had been going on for nearly a year, almost from the moment she'd started working there. But perhaps most crushing was what I learned about the fertility treatments. During one of our phone conversations, Daniel's mother let slip something that stopped me cold. "I just don't understand how Danny could do this," she was saying through tears. "Especially after everything you two went through to have a baby. He was so worried about the expense of those treatments, but he never said anything to you about it." "What do you mean, worried about the expense?" I asked. There was a pause. "Oh, honey, I thought you knew. Danny took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for the IVF treatments. He didn't want you to stress about the money on top of everything else." My blood ran cold. We owned our house jointly, but Daniel handled most of the financial paperwork. If he'd taken out a second mortgage without telling me, that was fraud. And if he'd done it around the same time he'd started his affair. I called our mortgage company as soon as I hung up with his mother. After verifying my identity, they confirmed my worst suspicions. Daniel had indeed taken out a $50,000 second mortgage 14 months ago, claiming it was for home improvements. The loan documents showed only his signature. 14 months ago was exactly when we'd started our second round of IVF treatments. It was also when Melissa had started working at his company. Daniel had put our home at risk to pay for the fertility treatments that gave us our daughter, and then started an affair with another woman while I was injecting myself with hormones and praying for a baby every day. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I actually laughed when I hung up the phone. What else was there to do? Maya looked at me with concern. "Rebecca, what's so funny?" "Nothing," I said, still laughing through tears. "Everything. My husband mortgaged our house to pay for fertility treatments and then started cheating on me with a 25-year-old while I was shooting hormones into my thigh every morning." "Jesus," Maya whispered. "The good news is I'm about to own a house free and clear," I continued, "because there's no way Daniel is keeping his job after this investigation, which means he won't be able to make the mortgage payments, which means the house will be mine in the divorce settlement." It was amazing how quickly the practical considerations took over once the emotional shock wore off. Daniel had made so many mistakes, legal, financial, professional, that my lawyer would have no trouble ensuring Sophia and I were well provided for. On our last day in the hospital, Daniel finally managed to get past security by claiming he was there to sign the birth certificate. When he walked into my room, I barely recognised him. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes were wrinkled, and there was a desperate energy about him that I'd never seen before. "Rebecca," he said, stopping just inside the door. "Please, we need to talk." I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, then back at the man who had fathered her but betrayed us both. "We have nothing to talk about," I said calmly. "Your lawyer can speak to my lawyer. Rebecca, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I interrupted, my voice still eerily calm. "Daniel, I'm not angry. Angry doesn't even begin to cover what I am. I'm devastated. I'm disgusted. I'm ashamed that I didn't see through your lies sooner. But I'm not angry anymore." He took a step closer, and I held up my hand to stop him. "You mortgaged our house without telling me," I continued. "You stole money from your company. You've been lying to me for a year while I carried your child. You told another woman that caring about my pregnancy was hell, so no, we don't need to talk. You need to leave." "She doesn't mean anything to me," Daniel said desperately. It was just a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. I love you, Rebecca. I love our family." I looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. There was a time when that face represented everything good in my world. Now it just looked like a stranger wearing a mask. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I asked quietly. "It's not even the cheating. It's that you were planning to leave us. You told her this was all temporary, that once the baby was born you'd find a way out. You made me go through pregnancy and childbirth believing I had a partner, believing our baby would have a father who wanted her. That's unforgivable, Daniel. Maya, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and moved toward the door. I think you need to leave now, she said firmly. Rebecca has been through enough. Daniel looked between us, his desperation growing. Rebecca, please. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job, I'll cut off all contact with Melissa. I'll go to therapy. You can't quit a job you're about to be fired from, I said dryly. And therapy might be a good idea, but not for us. For you. To figure out how you became the kind of person who could do this to his family. I shifted Sophia to one arm and reached for the manila envelope Maya had brought me that morning. These are divorce papers, I said, holding out the envelope. My lawyer filed them yesterday. You'll also find a restraining order preventing you from accessing our joint bank accounts or making any financial decisions without court approval. Daniel's face went white as he took the envelope with shaking hands. You can see Sophia, I continued. I won't keep you from your daughter, but it will be supervised visits until we can establish paternity and work out a formal custody arrangement through the courts. Paternity? Daniel's voice cracked. Rebecca, she's my daughter. Prove it, I said simply, because according to the timeline I've worked out with my lawyer, your affair started around the same time we conceived. I want a DNA test. It was a bluff. I knew Sophia was his daughter, but I wanted him to sweat a little, to feel some of the uncertainty and fear he'd put me through. Daniel sank into the chair Maya had vacated, his head in his hands. I've lost everything, he whispered. No, I corrected him. You threw everything away. There's a difference. The next several months were a blur of legal proceedings, emotional upheaval, and the overwhelming exhaustion of new motherhood. The divorce moved quickly, largely because Daniel's mounting legal troubles made him eager to settle rather than fight. His company fired him after their investigation revealed the full extent of his embezzlement. The district attorney decided not to press criminal charges in exchange for full restitution, but Daniel's reputation in the financial industry was destroyed. He ended up taking a job at a small firm in Milwaukee, making a fraction of his previous salary. Melissa, meanwhile, had been transferred to another department at the first sign of trouble, and according to office gossip that filtered back to me through mutual friends, she quickly distanced herself from Daniel once his legal troubles became public. Apparently, an unemployed, soon-to-be divorced father wasn't quite as appealing as a successful married executive. The house became mine in the divorce settlement, along with full custody of Sophia and substantial child support payments. Daniel's second mortgage became his responsibility alone, which meant he was essentially paying for my home while living in a studio apartment across town. The irony wasn't lost on me. But the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't financial. It was watching Daniel realize what he'd lost. During his supervised visits with Sophia, I could see the regret in his eyes as he held his daughter for a few precious hours before having to give her back. He'd traded daily life with his child for a few months of excitement, with a woman who'd abandoned him the moment things got difficult. 6 months after Sophia was born, Daniel asked to meet with me privately. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where we could talk without the lawyers present. I want you to know that I understand now, he said, his voice quiet and tired. What I did, what I threw away. I see it clearly now. I sipped my latte and waited for him to continue. Melissa broke up with me 3 months ago, he admitted. She said dating a divorced father wasn't what she'd signed up for. She wanted the excitement of an affair, not the reality of a relationship. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I felt sorry for the man he'd become. I keep thinking about that night, Daniel continued, when you went into labour and I was texting her instead of taking care of you. I think about Sophia's birth, how I missed it because I was too ashamed to face what I'd done. I think about all the moments I've already missed with her, and all the moments I'm going to keep missing. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I know it's too late for us, he said. I know I destroyed any chance of getting my family back, but I want you to know that losing you and Sophia has been the worst punishment I could have ever imagined. Worse than losing my job, worse than the financial problems, worse than anything. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity, but all I saw was genuine remorse and regret. "Daniel," I said gently, "I appreciate you telling me this, and I'm glad you understand the gravity of what you did. But this isn't about punishment. This is about consequences. You made choices, and this is the result of those choices." "I know," he whispered. "Sophia is going to ask questions about you someday," I continued. "She's going to want to know why Mommy and Daddy don't live together, why she only sees you on weekends. And when that day comes, I'm going to tell her the truth, that sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love, and that actions have consequences." "What will you tell her about me?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I'll tell her that you loved her enough to help create her, but that you weren't ready to be the father she deserved. And I'll tell her that she's better off with one parent who puts her first than two parents, where one is only pretending." Daniel nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I'll also tell her," I added, "that people can change, that you learned from your mistakes and became a better person because of them, but only if that turns out to be true." That conversation marked a turning point in our post-divorce relationship. Daniel stopped asking for reconciliation and started focusing on being the best father he could be within the boundaries I'd established. He never missed a visitation, never showed up late, and never tried to manipulate me through Sophia. A year after our divorce was finalized, I ran into Melissa at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. She was with a man I didn't recognize, laughing and holding hands. When she saw me, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Rebecca," she said awkwardly. "Hi." "Hello, Melissa," I replied calmly. She introduced the man as her fiancé, a successful attorney she'd met at a bar association event. Apparently, she'd moved on quickly from Daniel to someone with better prospects and fewer complications. How is the baby?" she asked hesitantly. "Sophia is wonderful," I said, pulling out my phone to show her a recent photo. "She's walking now, getting into everything. She keeps me busy." Melissa looked at the photo, and I saw something flicker across her face. Regret? Guilt? It was hard to tell. "She's beautiful," she said softly. "Yes, she is," I agreed. "Daniel's been a good father to her, considering the circumstances." It was a small kindness, but I saw Melissa's shoulders relax slightly. "I'm glad," she said. I want you to know that I'm sorry. For what happened, for my part in it." I studied her face, this young woman who had helped destroy my marriage, but who now seemed genuinely remorseful. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I hope you've learned something from the experience." "I have," she said quickly. "I would never... I'm not that person anymore." I nodded. "Good. Because affairs don't just hurt the spouses who are betrayed. They hurt everyone involved, including the children who get caught in the middle." As I walked away from that encounter, I realized that I felt nothing toward Melissa. No anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge. She was just a young woman who had made poor choices and would have to live with the consequences. Just like Daniel. The real victory wasn't in their suffering, it was in my healing. 2 years after Sophia was born, I met someone new. His name was Marcus, and he was a pediatric nurse at Sophia's doctor's office. He was kind, patient, and completely besotted with my daughter from the moment he met her. "She's got your eyes," he said during one of Sophia's checkups, making her laugh with silly faces while he took her temperature. "And her father's stubborn streak," I replied, watching him work with practiced ease. "The stubborn streak comes from you," he said with a grin. "I can tell." He was right. Motherhood had made me fiercer, more decisive, less willing to compromise on things that mattered. It had taught me to trust my instincts and stand up for myself and my daughter. Marcus and I took things slowly. He understood that Sophia came first, that any relationship I entered into had to be built on a foundation of trust and respect that could never be shaken. He proved himself over months of casual interactions, small gestures, and consistent behaviour. When I finally introduced him to my family, Maya pulled me aside. "This one's different," she said. watching Marcus help Sophia build a tower with blocks on my parents' living room floor. "How can you tell?" I asked. "Because he's not trying to impress anyone," she said. "He's just being himself. And himself happens to be someone who genuinely enjoys spending time with a 2-year-old. She was right. Marcus never tried to replace Daniel in Sophia's life, or rush into a parental role he hadn't earned. He simply became a positive presence in our world, someone Sophia could count on to be there, to be consistent, to be honest. When Daniel met Marcus during a custody exchange, I watched his face carefully for signs of jealousy or hostility. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected. Relief. "He seems like a good guy," Daniel said quietly, as Marcus buckled Sophia into his car seat. "He is," I replied. "I'm glad," Daniel said, and I could tell he meant it. "I'm glad she has someone like that in her life, someone stable." It was perhaps the most mature thing Daniel had said to me since our divorce. "She has you too," I reminded him. "You're her father. That matters." Daniel nodded, but I could see the weight of his regret in his expression. He would always be Sophia's father, but he would never be the constant, reliable presence in her life that Marcus had become simply by showing up consistently and honestly. On Sophia's 3rd birthday, we had a small party in the backyard of our home, the home that was now truly ours, free and clear. Marcus helped me hang streamers while Sophia supervised from her high chair, clapping her hands and babbling instructions in her own special language. Daniel came to the party, as he did for all of Sophia's important moments. He brought her a beautiful wooden dollhouse that he'd obviously spent considerable time and money on. When Sophia squealed with delight and threw her arms around his legs, I saw him close his eyes and hold her tightly. "Thank you, Daddy," she said in her sweet 3-year-old voice. "I love it." "I love you too, baby girl," he whispered. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Daniel approached me on the back deck where I was cleaning up paper plates and plastic cups. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For letting me be here. For not poisoning her against me. For giving me the chance to be her father even though I don't deserve it." I paused in my clean-up and looked at him. 3 years had changed him. He was thinner, greyer, more serious. But there was something else there too, a humility that hadn't existed before, a recognition of what really mattered. "She deserves to know her father," I said, "and you've worked hard to become someone worthy of knowing her." It was true. Daniel had been consistently present for Sophia, had never missed a payment or a visitation, had shown up for every birthday and school event he was invited to. He wasn't the partner he should have been to me, but he was becoming the father Sophia needed. "I think about that night a lot," he said quietly. "The night she was born. How I should have been there with you, supporting you, celebrating with you. How I should have been the first person to hold her." "Daniel," I said gently, "you can't change the past, but you can keep showing up for the future." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I just want you to know that losing you and Sophia was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But it was also the thing that made me finally grow up. I'm not the same person I was then." "I can see that," I said honestly. As he was leaving, Sophia ran up to him for one more hug. He scooped her up and spun her around, making her giggle. "Bye, Daddy," she said, planting a wet kiss on his cheek. "Bye, Princess. I'll see you next weekend, okay?" "Okay. Will you bring more books?" "Of course I will." I watched this interaction with a mixture of emotions. There was still sadness for what could have been, but also gratitude for what was. Sophia had a father who loved her, even if he'd learned that love through loss. She had a stable, loving home. She had Marcus, who was becoming a steady presence in her life. She had extended family who adored her. Most importantly, she had a mother who would never settle for less than she deserved again. 6 months later, Marcus proposed. He did it simply, quietly, on a Tuesday evening after we'd put Sophia to bed. We were sitting on the couch, watching a terrible romantic comedy and sharing a bowl of popcorn, when he suddenly turned to me. "Rebecca," he said, "I love you. I love Sophia. I love the life we're building together. I want to make it official. He didn't have a ring. We'd talked about that, about how traditional romantic gestures felt less important than practical demonstrations of commitment. Instead, he handed me a key. It's to my apartment, he explained. I was thinking we could sell it and use the money to renovate the upstairs of this house, maybe add a master suite, give Sophia her own bathroom. I stared at the key, understanding what he was really offering. Not just marriage, but partnership. Not just romance, but practical support for the family I'd already built. Yes, I said simply. Yes to the proposal, or yes to the renovation? He asked with a grin. Yes to all of it, I said, kissing him. Yes to everything. We told Sophia the next morning over breakfast. At 3 years old, she didn't entirely understand the concept of marriage, but she understood that Marcus would be living with us permanently. Will you be my daddy too? She asked him seriously. Marcus looked at me and I nodded. We'd discussed this possibility many times. I would love to be your daddy too, he said carefully. But you already have a daddy who loves you very much. I would be your stepdaddy. Is that okay? Sophia considered this solemnly, then nodded. Can I call you Daddy Marcus? I would love that, he said, his voice thick with emotion. When we told Daniel about our engagement during the next custody exchange, he was quiet for a long moment. Congratulations, he said finally. Marcus is a good man. Sophia is lucky to have him. She's lucky to have both of you, I replied. Will she still be Sophia Chen? He asked hesitantly. That's her name, I said gently. Marcus isn't trying to replace you, Daniel. He's just adding to her family. Daniel nodded, but I could see the complex emotions playing across his face. Relief that Sophia would have a stable father figure, grief that it wasn't him, acceptance that this was the consequence of his choices. I want you to know, he said, as he buckled Sophia into her car seat, that I'm grateful for how you've handled all of this. You could have made this so much harder for me. That wouldn't have been good for Sophia, I said simply. No, he agreed, but not everyone would have seen it that way. As they drove away for their weekend together, I reflected on how far we'd all come. Daniel had lost the right to be Sophia's primary father figure, but he'd earned the right to remain in her life. I had lost the marriage I'd thought I wanted, but gained the strength to build something better. Sophia had lost the intact family I'd dreamed of giving her, but gained a foundation of love and security that would serve her well throughout her life. 3 years later, Sophia was 6 years old, precocious and confident and completely secure in her place in our blended family. She moved easily between her time with Daniel and her time with Marcus and me, comfortable in both worlds. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. Mummy, why didn't you and Daddy Daniel stay married? I had been dreading this question, but also preparing for it. I sat down on the edge of her bed and chose my words carefully. Sometimes, sweetheart, people make choices that hurt the people they love. Daddy Daniel made some choices that hurt me very much, and we couldn't stay married anymore. Did he not love you? She asked, her big brown eyes serious. I think he did love me, I said honestly, but love isn't always enough. People also have to be kind to each other and honest and keep their promises. Daddy Daniel had trouble with those things. Sophia nodded solemnly. But he loves me, right? Oh, baby, I said, pulling her close. He loves you so, so much, and so do I. And so does Daddy Marcus. You are surrounded by love. I know, she said matter-of-factly. I'm very lucky. Yes, I agreed, kissing her forehead. You are very lucky, and so am I. As I turned off her light and closed her door, I thought about that little girl's simple wisdom. She was very lucky, and so was I. Not because of what we'd avoided, but because of what we'd built from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The toxic marriage was over, the betrayal was in the past. What remained was a life built on honesty, respect and genuine love, the kind of love that shows up every day, that makes sacrifices without resentment, that chooses commitment over convenience. Daniel had taught me what I wouldn't accept, Marcus had shown me what I deserved, and Sophia had given me the strength to know the difference. The best revenge, I realised, wasn't destroying the person who hurt you. It was building a life so beautiful, so full, so grounded in authentic love that their absence became a gift instead of a loss. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, if you've ever had to choose between staying comfortable or demanding better, if you've ever had to protect your children while still allowing them to love imperfect people, this story is for you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better. Subscribe for more stories about women who chose themselves and their children over toxic relationships. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve. Your children are watching, and they're learning what love should look like from the example you set. Make sure it's an example that serves them well.